Peace and wellness to beautiful souls, magnificent beings. In this video, guys, we'll cover the power of ginger powder and in its raw form, its effects on visceral fat, insulin resistance, and much more, how to use it. Allow us to dive in, allow Thomas to share with you the information that I want to get across to you. Sit back and relax.
Less than $1, and it legit drops fasting blood glucose by almost 20 points. That's not some crazy company claim. That's a legit meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled trials. This ends up having a ripple effect on insulin resistance and visceral fat, and seriously fast. So to put that in perspective, these results are in the same neighborhood as a lot of pharmaceutical interventions for insulin resistance and for blood sugar. But it's extremely important that you don't use ginger in a certain form, because it actually loses a lot of the benefit for the metabolism that we're after in the first place. So here's how we'll break this all down. First, we're going to talk about what happens chemically when ginger goes through a transformative drying phase and how that's different from fresh. Then we'll get into the blood sugar data and 3 very distinct mechanisms that make ginger so effective for glucose control, for brown adipose tissue, for insulin resistance, and of course for visceral fat. And after that, we'll go more into.
So that is a big statement that he's making. We'll look at the research, the clinical trials that he's talking about, and see exactly what it is that ginger is able to do and why it's able to do what it's able to do. He'll break it down, he'll show the studies, and he'll give us the information we need in order to use it effectively. Again, I'm one of those individuals who treat my type 2 diabetic condition naturally, as well as any other health issues that I'm dealing with. I'm not telling you that you have to, but I'm always promoting that you learn more about natural modalities versus just solely dependent upon pharmaceutical intervention. But again, your body, your choice. Allow him to continue.
Fat loss. We'll talk about thermogenesis, and we'll talk about a fascinating finding about a compound in ginger that triggers fat burning without any spicy sensation whatsoever. So it triggers it at rest. And then I'll give you a bonus section on inflammation and how it ties back to everything that we just covered, not to mention how to use it properly so we're not wasting our time. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with this 2018 study that was in Molecules that took a look at what happened to ginger's bioactive compounds under different drying conditions. This is super important because this matters for how you use ginger or the kind of ginger that you go and buy. So they took fresh ginger and they subjected it to multiple different drying methods at a lot of different temperatures. And they measured the concentrations of 6 really important compounds. They looked at 3 different gingerols, which are very important in ginger, and they looked at 3 different shogaols. And what they found is that fresh ginger is dominated by what are called gingerols, which are great for lots of things, particularly something called 6-gingerol. And shogaols were barely present in the actual fresh ginger. But when heat is applied, that flips. Gingerols lose a water molecule under thermal stress, and this converts directly into shogaols. So the sweet spot was actually hot air drying at 150 degrees Celsius for about 6 hours. That's a lot of heat, which produced the highest concentrations of all 3 shogaols and the strongest antioxidant activity. Now, we could speculate that it's because it's under stress, it's actually activating some of these compounds. But if you start pushing it past 180 degrees, you hit a thermal ceiling where compounds actually start degrading. So there is a window, and dried ginger powder, the cheap stuff, sits right in it. So the part that matters the most is that despite being found in lower concentrations naturally, shogaols consistently outperform gingerols in the anti-inflammatory.
So this is the key to what it is that I like to share with you guys on my post. It's not just about one thing versus the other. It's a combination of things that can help to transform whatever conditions that we find ourselves dealing with. As it has been said before, let food be the medicine. Again, this is only a limited take. When you need pharmaceutical meds, they are indeed beneficial in acute situation and in genetically chronic situations of health diseases. But most of us are and our disease has been driven by lifestyle choices. So the first thing, above and beyond anything else, is to tie into the nutrition. You and I, which I've tried before, we cannot out-train a bad diet. I was told this a long time ago from the individual that brought me into health and fitness in my younger days. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to what is the number one priority of a healthy human organism, it is the nutrition that you and I are taking or intaking. Exercise and everything else is a valuable, very helpful, and beneficial add-on. You and I cannot out-train a bad diet, meaning that if I had to choose, and if I was to sit down and have a choice between a healthy diet and moderate exercise versus an extreme exercise regimen that is highly effective and a poor to moderate diet, the outcomes of the individual with the great diet and moderate exercise will far and beyond supersede that of the individual who has the great workout and a poor or bad diet. So allow that to sink in. Allow us to continue with Thomas.
Assays, the antioxidant activity, and what's important for this video, a receptor called TRPV1. Now we're going to come back to that tool TRPV1 because it's very important when we start talking about the fat loss mechanisms. But I want to get into the blood sugar data that I mentioned when we first started. Now, the meta-analysis that I mentioned was published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine. It looked at ginger's effect on metabolic markers for type 2 diabetes patients across 10 different RCTs. Beyond the roughly 18.8 milligram per deciliter reduction in fasting blood glucose, they also saw really wild things. They found that HbA1c, the marker for long-term blood sugar, was significantly reduced. But what makes this more than just sort of a ginger lowers blood sugar and helps insulin resistance story is that there are 3 distinct mechanisms that are working simultaneously here. And this we could use to our advantage. First, gingerols and shogaols increase GLUT4 translocation, which is an insulin-independent glucose uptake mechanism driven by a calorie deficit, by exercise. It's just driven by what's called AMPK activation. The compounds in ginger activate AMPK in the muscle, but also in the liver tissue. So this drives glucose transporters to the cell and actually lets them get into the cell without insulin. So it's essentially mimicking the action of like metformin. And then secondly, ginger does something unique by inhibiting alpha glucosidase and alpha amylase. So these are the enzymes that break dietary starch into glucose. By slowing that process, we blunt the postprandial glucose spike after any carbs. This is huge again. And then thirdly, the one that I find the most fascinating because I'm a nerd for TRPV1 is the TRPV1 activation. Now, if you activate TRPV1 in pancreatic beta cells, it has been shown to modulate insulin secretion dynamics. So you have 3 really independent mechanisms compounding on each other for insulin resistance, which is why the effect is.
So as you can see, the power of ginger and its compounds and its effect on the human organism at the biological level, specifically dealing with fat loss, specifically dealing with insulin and how the body releases insulin and its ability to bring blood glucose into the cell without the secretion of insulin is very important. For more on this information, follow Thomas Delore on YouTube, and you can watch that entire video. But again, it's key for us to understand is food and the right food, spices and the right spices, etc., can have a profound impact on our biological markers. It can help with specific conditions that we're dealing with if we understand it, if we use it right, combined with a overall healthier lifestyle. You and I can have and get great results. Again, It takes discipline, it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes commitment. For high level coaching, hit me up. Peace.